Time now for the Daily Answer, sponsored by Salem Surround on The Answer Now TV.
Carrie Severino, it's good to be back with her over there at judicialnetwork.com. She is the president there at JCN Severino. That's Severino, JCN Severino on X. And Carrie, good to see you in the new year. How are you?
Good morning. Just sent a kid off to college myself, so here we go.
You know what that feels like then. Yeah, it's fun. I don't know if do you enjoy it, or does it make you winsome?
Well, this is her second year. It was a little harder last year. It's sad to see him go, but it's great to see them come back and have the kids all reconnect.
Yeah. I think you're doing well, right? They tell us you're doing well if the kids are excited to go off and leave the nest and do their own thing. If they're clinging to the door and, crying as you leave, you've not probably done as well as you'd like.
Yeah, they should be a little more mature by that point. But it's good to see when they're happy to come home, and we'll see.
Yes.
Good luck with this.
Yeah, amen. Well, look, we brought you in this morning because it sounds like the Supreme Court's getting ready to finally. It feels like we've been talking about this for a good long while. In fact, I even thought it had been before the court before, but it seems like for the very first time, in a sincere way, the court is going to take up this issue of men playing women's sports and whether states can have a say in this or not. Is that about right? This is the first kind of definitive case regarding this before the court?
That's right. We recently had the case in Tennessee about whether minors had to be allowed to have sex change surgeries and cross-sex hormones. And the court said, no, a state can choose not to allow that for minors. And now this is a similar question, but for sports. It's not saying states have to say only girls in girls sports, even though I think that makes a lot of sense. It's saying, can states even make this choice? Or does the Constitution forbid it? I think it's pretty clear the answer is no. The Constitution says nothing that forbids women's sports for being for women.
Is this any different in your view? And I'm asking your opinion, but we've seen Roe versus Wade overturned and sent back to the states. Some have speculated that marriage may be next, although others have said the court's probably not going to have an appetite to take that up. But is this kind of in line with that? Men playing women's sports, gay marriage, abortion, in your view? There's nothing in the Constitution that talks about governing any of that.
Absolutely. Although here it's obviously even an easier case because thankfully we now have an originalist Supreme Court. We don't have a court that's making stuff up like they were doing in Roe, that's making the mistakes like they were making in Obergefell. So it's very simple when you look at this on a clean slate. There's not even the question of should we overturn this, should we not? It's like, no, it's not in there. We're not going to make up words in the Constitution that aren't there. And thank God we have a court, finally, it took many years to get there, but we finally have a court that recognizes that simple truth.
I know you're not here to discuss this, but I would just quickly ask, and if you would rather not, because that's not why we brought you here, I'm just curious. When we talk about tariffs, the Supreme Court's going to play a very important role in President Trump's economic policy, and tariffs a biggie. Do you have any sense of when and how that might shake out as well?
Yeah, based on the arguments, it's hard to say. I would say there's a decent chance that they're going to find that Trump does not have the authority to do these tariffs as he's done them, at least so far. They're very concerned about having opening the door to any old emergency that whatever future president also might come up with, whether it's calling climate change an emergency or something like that. So, but we really don't know the answer to that, and we won't know it maybe till June. They might be moving faster on this case, but fast in Supreme Court time, it's like dog years. It probably will take till June on an important case like this.
They do consider structurally, don't they, what it would mean that all of the revenue that's already been derived from the tariffs, what that means if you rule them wholly unconstitutional. There's probably something to be said about having to give money back, perhaps, and that's a mess.
Yeah, it definitely could get things very complicated, and I'm not sure whether the Supreme Court, how much they would weigh in on that in the first instance, or whether that would be something that first would have to go back to the lower courts, and they would have to decide how are repayments happening, and then who knows, maybe that question works its way back to the Supreme Court. So all of this becomes very complicated, could theoretically take a lot of time.
And they also are very, very important when it comes to judicial lower court power and what has been at every turn, not Congress certainly, but this president's agenda has largely been thwarted by federal judges. And I know the court has had some say in that so far, the Supreme Court, that is. Do you anticipate more of the Supreme Court coming down one way or the other on some of the way these federal judges, these lower court judges, have ruled against the president's administration?
Well, what we've seen so far is a lot of emergency petitions that the court has granted in the administration's favor, by and large, saying, hey, these lower courts, obviously there's a role for hearing these cases, but we have to not jump in and just try to enjoin everything that an administration is doing. We have to make sure the courts are acting based on law and not based on their own political persuasions. So a lot of those cases haven't really been decided finally by the Supreme Court, but what we've seen so far is them stepping in, trying to stem the lower court abuses where they're reaching out and trying to, block far more activity than they have the authority to do. But it does take a long time for the case on the merits to come all the way through the court.
I know you're a constitutionalist, Carrie Severino, president of JCN, judicialnetwork.com, at JCN Severino on X. But it's very clear, and it's been true for quite a while, I think. Even the late Justice Scalia lamented it. Congress seems to be almost muted, almost sidelined, almost infirm. It seems like we have just come to a place where it's the executive versus the judiciary. And that's it. It's almost as though the legislative branch doesn't exist. Is that your sense of it? It's kind of depressing, actually.
Well, I think a key part to trying to make Article 1 great again, try to get Congress doing its job, is for courts to step back and not try to legislate from the bench. That's kind of, even circling it back to the cases that are going to be argued today. What happened here is we have 27 states now that have made decisions, whose legislatures, who were elected by the people, said, hey, these are the laws we want. We want to protect women's sports. We want to protect these young women for fair competition and safety as well. And the people are asking the courts to overturn that, to step in where the legislature has spoken. It's a key role of the courts not to just step into every single debate because someone has asked them to do that, but to say, hey, is this something that's in the proper province of the legislature? And sometimes it's going to be frustrating because, in this one, I think the legislature's had it right. They have some really common sense laws, but the court's sometimes being asked to step back and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to rewrite this law that maybe is out of date, that maybe is badly written in the first place. And when they stop acting, that then I hope will light the fire under Congress to do its job, which is, okay, now you guys have to fix this law. If you don't like the way that's coming out, you need to fix it. Don't come running to the courts asking us to rewrite something that you did a sloppy job on the first time around.
And when it comes to election integrity, this is another huge one. And I think people look to the Supreme Court to come in and fix when you talk about, people improperly voting, illegally voting, people on voter rolls that shouldn't be, redistricting. It's the court generally, am I correct? The Supreme Court generally says, look, that's between you guys and your local legislatures to figure out on balance. Is that about right?
That's true in a lot of cases. And I think it may come true in even more cases if the recent redistricting case goes the way that I think it may. There's been a lot of people who will constantly try to overturn redistricting based on various federal laws and trying to get courts more involved in micromanaging that than they ought to be in terms of the different states. I think the Supreme Court is starting to realize this is a fool's errand. We can't be micromanaging every single one of these things. And, we live in a democracy. The truth is, in a lot of cases, the backstop is you get the government you deserve in a democracy. We need to go out there and make sure we're electing people who are going to pass the kinds of laws that we agree with. The court isn't here and isn't going to be able to fix every error that's made by a legislature or everything that's just bad policy. That's not their job to come up with what the right policy is. It's our job as citizens to go out there and vote for people who will pass the laws that we think best protect liberty.
Yeah, you got to know who your state senators and your state representatives are. Just the same as we talk about the federal folks on Capitol Hill, you got to know who's running in your state capital as well. Carrie Severino, judicialnetwork.com. Always appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks. Have a great day.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel. Stay informed anytime, anywhere with the Salem News Channel and 9:30 a.m. TheAnswer.com. This has been The Daily Answer, sponsored by Salem Surround on The Answer Now TV.